Well, hello there and welcome back to the channel. And today we find ourselves back here at one of my favourite, fairly local locations for me here. And I've come back here because I want to run you guys through a recent photo shoot I took here just the other night. And I got some gorgeous images from this spot. And I've been waiting actually to come back here a bit later in the year because I wanted to get the Milky Way core setting over there in the western sky over the lake. Now you can see in the background we've got this dead tree and the rocks and the water in the background. All of those things combine for some absolutely gorgeous compositions. So today I'm just going to run you through those so you can see in the daytime what it looks like here. And I was pretty happy with the shots I got, so let's get into it. I'll show you how I took them. Now I don't reckon I've ever been to this location where it hasn't been blowing an absolute gale, and once again today the wind is really heavy coming straight off the water, and that's pretty much the way the weather seems to run here. But anyway, one of the main purposes I had for coming to this location was to shoot some panoramas, because here in the southern hemisphere the Milky Way stretches right across the sky over there in the west, and it looks absolutely majestical when you stitch a number of images together. So my first composition, when I first got here, the core was still reasonably high in the sky. In fact, it was above the top of these trees you can see in the background here. And I got my Nikon Z6 with my 20mm f1.8S lens and decided to put my camera into portrait orientation. So I shot 10 frames, or was it 9? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, so I'll tell you in a minute. In portrait orientation at f2.2, 15-second shutter speed at ISO 6400. Now, one of the things about panos is it was completely dark, by the way, no moonlight, there's no light pollution out here, there's no street lights or anything like that. So I thought to myself, how am I going to light the foreground? Because I wanted to make sure I could just see these trees and the ground that's around and a few rocks over there. So I got two of my Z96 video lights, and on pretty much the lowest level I put one right over there shining back this way and one over here shining across that way. And they were, I would suggest, probably maybe 20 meters from the trees. They were a long way back and they were on a very low level, but I did have the orange gel over the front, and because I wanted to warm this image. Now I was shooting at about a 4000 Kelvin white balance, so I just wanted to warm this ground up a little bit here, and very, very happy with how that image came up. It looks magnificent, the Milky Way core stretching across the sky, and yeah, I think you'll like this one. Now I'm sure you'll remember that I've shot this tree a couple of times before with great results, but every time that I've been here in the past I've been shooting towards the east, so the Milky Way core was coming up over in the eastern sky. That was earlier in the year, and I did a video here talking about shooting Milky Way portraits using flash photography, so I used that as one of the subject matter here and the rocks down by the water. But on this occasion I had the Milky Way over the top there, and so I decided to shoot some stacked shots and also a single shot, but I lined up again in portrait orientation and shot about 12 exposures blending and stacking for noise reduction with the intention of going through the software Sequator, which is the stacking and noise reduction software. It works really well, so I'd strongly suggest Sequator for Windows, Starry Landscape Stacker for Mac. Now, Sequator is free, Starry Landscape Stacker is not a free software, but it is really, really good. Anyway, I shot 12 exposures there, f2.2, ISO 6400, and they were 10-second shutter speeds. Focus to infinity, so the stars are at infinity obviously, so I'm focusing on the stars. The whole point of this is to get those stars nice and sharp and crisp. And then I took about 8 foreground shots. Now it might not take 8 necessarily, but I took 8 just lighting around with my torch, just my flashlight. And I shot those at f5, ISO 500, again for 10-second shutter speeds. And I made sure my focus was sharp on the tree. Now, to be quite honest with you, the focus will pretty much be the same because I was far enough back from the tree, especially when I stopped the lens down to f5, that increases the plane of focus. So in other words, I was at f2.2 previous to that, focus to infinity. When I stopped down to f5, I'm still focused to infinity, but that tree is going to come into focus because it's not too close to the camera. But if in any doubt at all, just make sure you refocus on the foreground, because I want the foreground to be nice and sharp, and especially with that little bit of light painting. And I'm light painting off on the sides and angles. Sometimes with the rocks, I'm actually over the top of the rocks, because that gives you that nice, I guess, highlight and shadow across, especially rocks, things that are rounded, rocks, trees, fantastic composition subjects for light painting. And yeah, so I think that one looks awesome. I've included a single image here to give you a bit of a frame of reference to see the difference between a single image shot at ISO 6400 f2.2 15 seconds with my stacked image, and just see what you think. Now, one of the things I really do like to do is try different focal length lenses. And so while I was here, I had my Nikon 35mm f1.8s lens, and I put that on and decided to shoot the same tree in a very similar, I guess, composition, just to see what the difference would be. So once again, I stacked that for noise reduction for the start. So I shot 10, or might have been 12, at f2.2. This is at 35mm, remember. So f2.2, 8-second shutter speed. I lowered that a little bit at ISO 6400. Once again, focus to infinity, stacked for noise reduction. That's to make the stars sharp and crisp and noise free, stacked in Sequator. Then I took about 5 shots of the foreground with the same light painting method that I used for my previous image. And you can see there, I was on pretty much the same angle. What I was trying to do, and what I try to do often with trees like this, is to maximize the angle of the branches. So on some angles you will find that the branches overlap a bit too much, but of course you're dictated to by the composition of where the Milky Way is in the background. And especially with the core being horizontally stretched across the sky, and of course I'm shooting in a portrait orientation, I'm cutting down on the amount of the core that I'm capturing, which is actually why I shot panoramas while I was here as well, because I get a whole lot more real estate, if you like, into the shot. Anyway, I shot the same thing with those settings on my Z6 with the 35mm, and that looks pretty good. What it does, it compresses the background a bit more and brings that core in closer, so it looks like the core is actually bigger behind the tree, and I like that one as well. So while I had that 35mm lens on the camera, I decided to, I guess, maximise my opportunities here and brought it down a little bit closer to the shoreline because I wanted to shoot these rocks and still get the core up there in the background. So this again is a single frame, but again I stacked for noise reduction. So I shot multiple amounts of the sky, I think 10 or 12 again, 35mm, 8-second shutter speeds, f2.2, ISO 6400. So you can see there's not a lot of variation in the way that I shoot. When I'm shooting the Milky Way, often the settings are very, very similar. Now it may change a little bit depending on what gear you guys have, but for my cameras, that's what I've sort of found to be working pretty well. When I'm shooting for stacking for noise reduction, when I'm shooting multiple images one after the other, I like to keep the shutter speed fairly short because obviously the stars are moving through the frame. So I want to keep that gap or interval, if you like, between them fairly short so that there's not so much movement. I think it makes it easier for the software to be able to stitch it and blend it all together. But anyway, then I took a number of foreground shots, probably only 3 or 4, to light these rocks. And again, off from the angle, never lighting from the angle of where the camera is, because if I do that, it's just flat and dull and boring lighting, and I don't want that. But I love this because the Milky Way was quite low at this stage down over the water there, and it looks like it's just hovering across the water. And yeah, I really, really like this composition. So of course, while I was here and I had that 35mm lens attached to the camera, I decided I wanted to try shooting some panos with that, and mainly because I wanted to capture more of the core in the sky. So I tried 2 different compositions. One, I shot a 9-shot portrait orientation pano, starting including this tree and going right across to the other tree. And the other one was a 7-shot panorama, and I didn't include the second tree, so it's just over just that tree on this side, down towards the south a little bit more. And both of those worked out really well. And I think having the 35mm lens, as I said to you before, it draws that core in closer. So you'll see the difference between this lens and the first pano I shot with the 20mm lens. The 20mm gets a whole lot more real estate. The other thing, of course, is that when I first started here, shooting with that 20mm, the core was a lot higher. So by the time I got around to getting this pano with the 35mm, the core had set down lower down over the tree. So it does have a little bit different perspective. In that first shot, you'll notice there's quite an arch, or quite a bow, if you like. In these 2 shots I'm showing you here, it's a little bit straighter, and that's because the core is lower down in the sky. Nevertheless, I love them, and I think shooting panos with a little bit longer focal length is always a good idea. So when I was here previously, I'd scoped out this fence that goes down straight into the water and disappears. And I thought that would look fantastic because the Milky Way comes down straight over the top of the fence line. And so, of course, I came down here to take a shot. Now, I put my 20mm f1.8s lens back on because I wanted that wider field of view. So what I decided to do here was not do any light painting at all. I stacked the sky for noise reduction. So I shot 12 shots, f2.2, 10-second shutter speed, ISO 6400, pretty standard settings, same as all the rest that I did back over there. But then what was different was I shot 4 or 5, I can't remember exactly, I'll tell you in a minute, 4 or 5 foreground shots at f2.8, ISO 1600 for 60 seconds. So longer exposure foregrounds. And I shot 4 or 5, again to stack for noise reduction. Now, of course, a 60-minute shutter speed means that the stars are going to be trailing. So all I'm doing here is using 2 separate exposures and blending them together. So I did noise reduction on the sky stack, and I did noise reduction on the foreground stack, and just blended them together. Now, it's pretty easy to do because it's just a fairly straight horizon down there. So just blend one to the other. And that worked out really well. So as far as lighting goes, no moonlight, nothing. It's just ambient light. Now, there is a bit of light pollution off there in the far distance, and you'll see that on the horizon. In fact, you'll see that on all of these shots, because there's a town that's probably about 30 k's that way. Just lights up the horizon a little bit, but it doesn't interfere at all with the stars above, and that's the main thing. And so this one here, nice clean foreground, just using simple long exposures with no light painting. I think it looks okay. So what an absolutely gorgeous spot this is, and I'm so glad that I came back here to shoot these shots under the gorgeous Milky Way, clear sky. Wasn't as windy as this, so it was a lot easier. But I really appreciate the fact that you guys have come with me here today, just so we can go through some of the settings and some of the experiences I had here while I was out here at the lake. Now, this is a beautiful spot. No doubt I'll come back here again in the future. The water level changes, so this time it was a bit higher than the last time. There was plenty of rocks showing out of the water last time I was here. You know, it ebbs and flows depending on what time of year you decide to come here. But anyway, all the very best. Look, you guys have a fantastic week. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, I would so appreciate that. Give a thumbs up to this video and a like. Comments down below. Love reading the comments. And I'll get back to you guys next week with another episode somewhere out under the stars. All the very best. I'll see you then.